All right. I'm Greg, the creator of Superhero Coding. Today we're going to talk about Unity script-to-script interaction. This is a key concept. If you want to do anything decent in Unity, your scripts are going to have to talk to each other at some point. It's not super straightforward, but once you do it once or twice, you're going to get it. I mean, that's why I'm making these tutorials, so that people will build the skills they need to be able to bring whatever ideas you want to life. Script-to-script interaction is a key piece. Let's jump right in. So we're going to pick up where we left off last time. And that is this scene. I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to end up taking out the debug log error things, because that's not a great practice. You really want to leave the errors, this little box, for when right now it's like game is over, it shows up there. Not great. If I click that, then it'll show or not show any of these things. I click that, I can double click this, and it's going to take me directly to that line of code in the script, which is nice. I do use the console debug a lot. I'm old school, where text output console debugging was all you had. I talked about that some last time, about why I really like doing it that way. Right, everything looks good. So I'm going to take out the log error. Debug log, game over is just fine. And we're going to change a lot of the script anyway as we move things into a game manager, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right. That's there. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to duplicate that. Go to Flappy Game 05. Just jumping in, you probably ought to catch the first couple sessions of this course first. You're free to follow along, or you can get the code at a discount during the current month at superherocoding.com. But after the month is gone, the price for the project goes up. But you're welcome to just follow along and do what I do. If you want my code and assets, it's less than $1 a day during the current month. All right, we've got a new scene, Flappy Game 05. Double clicked on that, and then check up here just to make sure. Flappy Game 05. So far, everything has been in the player script. Basically, we got the Flappy player, and we've got the move and wrap, which is what the barriers have on them. It could just put, one move and wrap script here on the barrier, but it's easier to have it on here. It just gives more flexibility to have it on these individual items, even though it's not on the second one. Right now, we're checking the name of the actual object we hit. We're either looking for barrier, and that takes a life off the player, or we're looking for point wall, and that adds a point to the player. But right now, if you remember, when I hit play, we'll be able to see the only thing we've got going on really is the score. Oh, I clicked that to do that. Now the game's over. The only thing we've got going on is we're outputting the score, the lives, and all that stuff down in debug log. The console, which is cool, but we want this to actually be playable. In the next session, the last session of the month, we are going to talk about finishing it up, publishing it out, probably a WebGL build, and I'm going to put it on a website where people can play it. It's not great, I know, but it's Flappy Bird, ish. So, game manager. I am going to start with a new script called Game Manager. And I'm also going to create an empty object. Call that Game Manager. Actually, I think... Yeah, okay, that little icon tells me that Unity does something different with Game Manager. I'm actually going to rename that. I'm going to hit F2 and call it Flappy Manager instead. I think Game Manager is a reserved keyword. I don't know. It gives me the little icon which tells me Unity's doing something different with that. So that's that. Flappy Manager, double click that. And I'm going to have to rename it because this class name has to match that file name exactly, other than the .cs. But as long as they do, it is not a big deal. It's case sensitive, don't use spaces, you know the drill. All right. So what we're going to do, the key things we're going to be doing is moving stuff out of player into game manager. I want to put the score in the game manager. I might have like a start screen or an end screen. That'll probably be next week. This week, I want to get the game manager, keep it up with the score, keep it up with the lives, and maybe we'll get to the user interface that maps that stuff as well. Otherwise, that'll be part of the next session. So we've got the script. We've got, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Flappy Manager. I always put my game managers at the top. Put it wherever you want, but it's easier at the top to find. Drag that script onto there because the project is like your house. This is all the stuff that could be in a scene, or which might be a backpack or suitcase. The scene is all the stuff you need for a particular event or thing. You put, notebooks and books from your house or your project into your backpack or your scene to go to school or go to a friend's house. And you have different things. You might have a backpack to go to school and a backpack of video games and stuff that just goes to a friend's house. Those are different scenes. So only the things of the current scene matter. So all the scripts and the art and everything else in your project when you're making a build does not matter, does not come into play unless it's in the current scene. So we add the game manager, we drag the script into here, then the manager's in the scene, starting to run. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Move and wrap. The thing that we could move out of here, we could move the move speed out of here. I mean, technically, I guess we could move the min X and max X out of here into a manager. I think that'd be kind of arbitrary for what we're doing. I don't like doing stuff like that just for the sake of doing it. I'm just going to leave that. I think it's fine where it is. I like it on the individual objects. I don't want everything to be controlled from the game manager. I don't think that makes sense. I think the move speed and the min X and the max X and all that ought to be on individual items. So that's where it's at. One speed could be something that you might want to have in a manager if you wanted to speed up the game. You want to have it really slow in the beginning, and then each time they go through 10 barriers, it speeds up a little or something like that. And you can put speed in there, and that would make sense. We can also talk from the manager back to the barriers. I'm going to keep it as is. Mostly interested in moving stuff out of the player at the moment. So the key things we've got in the player are player score, player lives. I'm just going to copy those, and I guess the jump force. Again, that can be moved to a manager, but copied those, pasted them. Public int player score, public int player lives. And now we need to have a way to keep up with the score and the lives. A not great way to do it would be to just interact with these public variables from this script. That's a quick and dirty way. It's not great. It's better proper code to have a function that, I'll show you why. I'm going to delete those for now. I'll probably add both of them back in, but for now, I'm going to take that out. So if you're just incrementing the score from some other script, and we'd say, okay, Flappy Manager player lives equals, 3. Flappy Manager player lives equals Flappy Manager player lives -1. pseudocode. You get the idea. You lose some abilities. For example, so let's say we want to make, I'm going to make this a public, has to be a public function if you're going to access it from another script. That's key. So I'm going to call it public. And I mean, I'm trying to think of something that, player gets points. Or it could be player gets a point. And okay, well, maybe public int how many points equals 1. Default to 1. And so, that means to say public void, because we're not returning anything. How many points equals 1? So all the other script is going to say, hey, player gets points. And so we say, and then we need our void start, sure enough. And that's going to say player score equals 0 to start. Player lives equals 3 to start. I mean, these are being assigned. But again, if we want to move that out to a beginning of game function later, we'll want to assign them here, even though they're already assigned default values there. Player gets points. So that's going to say player score. Now I'm going to use the shorthand. Plus equals, which again, player score equals player score plus player score plus equals 1 if they just get 1 point, but because we defined it above, we say how many points. Because maybe you want the player to get 1 point each time they go through the barrier. Maybe you want them to get 5 points, or 10 points, or 100 points, or 1,000,000 points. You don't want them to do 1,000,000 points, but you might not want them to do 1 point either. And that's another piece of your game balancing that you're just going to have to kind of play with and see what feels good. Does it feel good to end the game and like, your score is 3? No, it does not. But at the same time, your score is 827 billion. That doesn't really help either. So, you got to find a balance. Is 1 point enough? For Flappy Bird it was. But maybe I want to do 10 points to make people feel like they got a little bit of a better score. So I'm going to leave that. And then probably in the editor, I'm going to change it to points equals 10. All right. So player gets points. So what we do then is we come over here and instead of, I'll leave those there for now. We'll comment them out in a minute when they're gone. So what we're going to do instead of player score equals player score plus 1, this is where we call on the Flappy Manager. All right, how do we do that? So Flappy Player is going to need a reference to Flappy Manager. It's going to be a public. It can also be a private serialized. I talked about that before. This is fine. It's going to be a public. And that just means it's going to show up in the inspector. So int, it's public. That's the type of variable. That's the name of the variable, default value. Right? Boolean is true, false, on, off, the name of it, type, name, etc. What we want here, we want a Flappy Manager type. We call it myFM. Save that. This could be a game object, and then you get the component and stuff off that in this same way. I like to declare it explicitly that this is what I'm looking for. And so we'll go back over here, and if I save this just to see if everything is connected, let's do a function and just call it connected. Nope. IntelliSense is getting on my nerves today. Public void we connected. Debug.log. We're connected. Now, if I come over here to Flappy Player, so we're assigning it, we're creating it. It's called myFM. That's the name of the variable. Flappy Manager is the type of the variable. And inside of start, I just want to say myFM dot we connected. Just that easy, sort of. All right, let's go back over here and let everything recompile. If I click on my Flappy Manager, I've got the player score, how many points, and player lives. Score and lives don't matter because they're being set inside of start. Points does. I'm going to say 10 points. And the other key thing, sphere, which we are now going to rename player, is that this is looking for a Flappy Manager, right? Now, you can hit this little button right here, and it's going to pull up the things that match. If this was a game object type, this would be a very long list. As it is, it's not, because it's looking at things in the scene that match. So I can either pick it there, or if I hit escape, I can take it and I can drag it down there. You don't do that and you hit play, it's going to try to call that, and you're going to get a null reference exception, which just means I couldn't find what you told me to look for. So, null reference exception. Object reference not set to an instance of an object, null reference. The way around that, well, the way around that is to have a Flappy Manager in there. But because that is a common thing, we can say if myFM equals null, debug.log warning. And actually we'll log an error. Could not find the Flappy Manager. Did you connect it? And that is a good use of an error because it's not actually going to work if that's not there. Save that. And then this says check to see if it's null. That time, I thought I started that, apparently not. Right. Play, and now there's still Flappy Manager set to none, and we will get an error. Could not find Flappy Manager. Did you connect it? No, we did not. There's also a thing you can do if you want to just shut everything down. Debug.break. So now, if I hit play, when we hit that script and that thing is not there, bam, done. Game stops. I mean, technically you can unpause it, but it's like if you really need to get your attention because something just went really wrong, debug.break is the way to go. So anyway, I'm going to take that out. No, you know what? I'm going to leave that in because that needs to be here. All right. If it is connected, then we pull that down there. We hit play. And the first thing we see should instead be a message that we connected. We are connected. All right. Congratulations. You just got your first script-to-script interaction done. Now, and so, yeah, we could do, now that that is connected, we can turn that off and we could say myfm.playerscore++, which again, same thing. But A, that's going to do player score equals player score plus 1. And even if we did, even if we took this whole line and did myfm even if we did that, it's not as good. Well, 1, because that's not our point value anymore. It's 1. we set that in the Flappy Manager. 2, I'll show you why we don't want to do that. Not as good. Much better. And I'll show you why. My FM dot player gets points. So when we hit here, instead of incrementing the local variable score by 1, we're instead going to call the Flappy Manager and say player gets points. What does that do? Comes over here, player gets points. You might think, okay, well, other than the score, how's that different? Well, watch this. Debug log. Our new score is, I guess I'll introduce this now. So if you start your debug log statement with a $, that will allow it to interpret stuff. Our new score is player score. So you have to start with a $, between the parentheses and the quote, and then you put this in curly brackets, and it will output very nicely what our new score is at. So that's another key difference. Add to the score, output the new score. Because when we get to a user interface, it's going to be important that we output the score, that we update the score. You don't want to just add points to the score and not update it. Well, this way, now every time that the player gets points, scores change, we can update the score. So that's a much more significant way. And this is kind of like a fancy version of a getter setter, which you're probably like, what is that? It's not really important. I mean, it's kind of a way to do this. Never mind. Anyway, this is a good way to do it. So now, let me come back here. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to play my sad little game. And there's our all the way back up. Our new score is 20. Our new score is 30. Our new score is 40. So, well, one, I'm going to comment this out. Or I guess that's if debug log is on. So, like that. Now, all those messages aren't going to be there anymore. The other thing was the player scores now, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go ahead and take that out. Take that out so that I'm just going to go ahead and remove all the references to score at this. Well, oh, score. Right. And you might have noticed when I deleted it at the top, it showed up there with squiggly red line under it, which means there's an error because it does not exist in context anymore. Context being this class. Save that. So that is a key piece. The other thing is we want to do lives in the same way. So public void player hit barrier. It's fine. Player lives equals player lives -1. Again, this is a great place to check and see if our game is over. If player lives equals 0 at this point, debug log, game's over, you lose. And then here, we could do a debug break if we wanted to, until we get a user interface up. So you hit the third one and bam, done. This is Flappy Bird, be like, hey, here's an ad. It's not, that's okay. And so again, this allows us to change it here from the manager. Flappy player script. And so we want to go back to Flappy player. And instead of that, we don't need that anymore. Let's take that out. That anymore. Is game running is still kind of relevant-ish. But instead, now we do myfm dot player hit barrier. Let me just comment all that out, the whole thing. So again, you might be like, yeah, cool, I still don't understand why this is better. Well, again, we have more control. We can do this. We can update the user and the user interface. Copy this. I'll put the player lives. You have player lives left. And when we add in our user interface, then we just change out the things here. You could have the manager keeping track of, if they get a bonus life, if they have a shield or something. So there's just different things you can do. You don't want all that stuff on your player controller. This should really be primarily, we're grabbing the input, we're reacting to the input, and then we're letting something else know, in this case, the Flappy manager, that stuff is happening. Save that, come back over here. Let's see what we got. Oh, there's our score. Oh, we have 2 lives left. Let's mess up. Bam. Game is over. You lose. We hit that right there, and then it did the debug break thing. It's like, done. All right. Cool. I'm going to duplicate this again and go to 06 and double click that. Look up here to make sure we're there. Let's add a user interface. I haven't done this much lately. I'm probably gonna mess this up. All right. UI. So we want to add some text. Now, as soon as you add anything in here, any component, an image, text, raw image panel, any of that stuff, it's going to add in the stuff that that is needed for the user interface, a canvas. It's also probably going to pop up and be like, you need the Text Mesh Pro Essentials. You need to add resources to your project. I don't know that that is essential, but I'm going to go ahead and humor it and do it anyway. But as soon as I did that, it added the canvas, the text item, and the event system. So all 3 of these are needed to do the UI. So there's our text, bottom. I'm going to scroll over. I'm just going to take that, I'm going to move it. And I'll just, yeah, it'll be fine. I'm just going to use one for the moment. I guess I can put it at the top. And then I probably want to actually do it up here. So what I'm doing is the UI system does take a little bit of getting used to. It works well, but it's not super intuitive all the time. So what I can do, I can take this text component. I'm going to click this. Right now, everything is based off of it being middle and center. If instead I hold down Alt on a PC, and I think it'd be Option on the Mac, and I click that up there, now it is anchored at the top left, which is what we want. I want it to be anchored off the top left. So now, as I move things around, you might have noticed a minute ago, it was disappearing as I moved around. Now it's not, because it is anchored, a little bit in and a little bit down from the top left. That's what we want. No matter the size of any of the rest of this, that's going to be there. I can make it bold. I can make it, 80. If I make it 80, then I need to come over here and adjust the size. That over, and I can see that's the amount of size it has to work with, and that is the text. So if I drag that out, it'll show up. Realize now 80 is probably a little big for a score. Do something like that. That's still going to be kind of big and arbitrary, and it probably ought to be in the top right corner instead, because that's where I'm kind of looking. But it makes the game harder because stuff's happening over here and this changes, and stuff's happening and this changes. So because the eye spot's movement first. Anyway. All right, let's get this in. And I'm gonna change this to welcome to Almost Flappy Bird. Almost Flappy Bird. That'll be fine. So what I need to do, I'm gonna come over here. Now, here we need to add a using statement. Using TM Pro. That's what we need. Then in the manager, I want to say public TMP underscore text. We're going to call this my output. I'm just going to use one line right now for the lives and the score. It's fine. And adding a second one, not a big deal, but for the sake of time, for now, it's like that. So, it's a good habit, it's good practice to be in the habit of when you add something like this, come back over here, go to your manager, and actually drag the sucker in there. All right, so now it's pointing to the right thing. Click that, it's here, it's there. So now I've got the right thing. I'm not going to put in a whole if null and all that. I could, not going to. But what I can do, so I could update, player gets points here, and I could update, player hit barrier there, or I could make one function, and this is not public, it's just a private one, and called update UI. And so that is going to say my output equals, now let's put it in a string. String UI update info equals, let's see, we will put score and lives. So let's do player score plus quote space points. It's going to be terrible to do this in one line. There. Plus lives. Lives left. And then I want to take that. My output, actually, I'm going to rename that. I'm going to rename that to txt output. It's a, I don't like putting, I player lives because it's an integer and stuff like that. With the UI elements, I think it's a good practice. So, if you've got a button, it starts with BTN, or drop down DD or whatever. Text output, starting with txt, not a bad idea. Now, I renamed it, so I'm going to have to come over here and pick Flappy Manager and drag it in there again. That's fine, because by changing the name, I've changed it. It's a whole new thing as far as the game's concerned. Text output. Text output dot text equals UI update info. All right, let's see if that works. That's not going to work. Who knows why it's not working? Because I never called update UI. That's why. But that's the beauty of this. I can now add that in here, and I can add that in here. And now, when the points get updated or the player hits the barrier, go and we can update the user interface. We can leave the debug log stuff in, doesn't matter. But now, once we start playing, yeah, well, that's not bad. Oh, 2 lives. Points. Just keep going. Whoa, no, hit it again. Yep, that's it. Game over. 170 points. That. Okay, I like that. So again, you're welcome to follow along, type everything in, use my art, which is not super fancy, or use your own art, follow along, do everything I've done, or you can get my assets, my code at superherocoding.com. First lessons content is always free. Other lessons for the month are at a discount during that month. If you want my code and assets to save yourself the time or there's a problem somewhere. So that is the core of Unity script-to-script interaction. It's not rocket science. Once you see kind of how it does what it does, I mean, you can now make any class you want. Make a script, attach it to an object, put in the stuff that you want, and we've now got the Flappy player that is, it's there. The manager's assigned. That's a key part. Got to have that there. And now instead of decrementing a score and everything in here, we just call the Flappy manager. This doesn't work for everything. If you've got thousands of players or dozens and dozens of objects, you don't want to have to link every one back to the manager. There are other ways to accomplish this with events and stuff like that. But for a lot of games, this is more than sufficient. For a lot of scripts, this is more than sufficient. You don't really want to get into the Flappy manager now having a reference back to the player, and then the Flappy manager does stuff with the Flappy player and stuff like that. If I needed to do something with the player, I could put a reference in here and then say, okay, delete, the object or deactivate the player. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. So this is just going to be a game object because we don't actually need to access anything in the Flappy player script. So just as another example, so we're going to have that Flappy player. It's just a game object as far as the manager is concerned. And what we're going to do is, rather than that debug break, game object. And so that's, like I said, if it's just a game object, you've got a lot of game objects in your scene. Because all these are game objects. We want the player, and instead of this debug break, we're going to say player, Flappy player, the game object, set active, false. And so that's just going to turn off the whole object, the whole script, in the same way that we, if we just click it off right there. So let's do one more. Right, so got it, it's there. We got 3 lives, we got 2 lives, we got 1 life. That's it, game's over. A lot of the old arcade games would do that. Your game's over and you can't do anything, but you can still see it run. It's still mocking you. That's fun. Yeah, another thing. So next week is going to be kind of cleaning up, publishing to WebGL. We'll probably make all these score things invisible. I'll get a better background. We'll get some clouds, that kind of stuff. So polishing and publishing. It'll be the